Welcome back to another episode of the Clinic Success Secrets podcast, where we uncover the strategies and insights that are driving clinic growth and excellence in patient care. Join us as we're diving again into expert advice and success stories from healthcare leaders around the globe. Today, it's my honor to have Dr. Mia Cowan, a distinguished figure in women's health and wellness. Dr. Cowan is the founder and director of the award-winning Me Bella Wellness Center, renowned for its excellence in gynecology, wellness, weight management, and intimacy care since 2010. Dr. Mia Cowan brings a wealth of experience as an accomplished author, highly respected doctor, and specialist, dedicated to enhancing patient care through personalized treatments and comprehensive services. Her clinic's commitment to excellence has earned numerous accolades, which you can into if she wants, depending how if she wants to be humble, that's okay too. Reflecting her dedication to setting brand new standards in patient-centric care. Mia, it's an absolute honor to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
To start things off, can you please share, the pivotal moments and challenges, uh, you know, when getting the ball rolling with Me Bella Wellness Center? You know, what's that look like, and how did you get into the role that you're in today?
Great question. So I would say I went and got my MBA when I was actually working for a group in the city. I served the indigent population in Jefferson County, where I grew up. And while I was working there, I already knew I wanted to start my own practice, but I started working on an executive MBA. So doing
Mhm.
that executive MBA definitely helped quite a bit in getting my practice started because Me Bella was pretty much birthed during the process of me getting my MBA. So I developed a plan for it during that time. That was my special project that I worked on. So that made things a little bit easier with me having the background because, as you may know, physicians are not trained on business. We are trained to serve. We are trained on the clinical aspects of medicine, but not the business component. So, obviously, I didn't quite know what I was getting into when I got into it, but having that MBA made a big difference, but it would there were still a lot of things that I had to learn that I just didn't know, and I didn't even know that I didn't know. So, I would say some of the challenges were figuring out the culture of the area that I live in and understanding how medicine works, and, when I went into it, I didn't really realize that I was gonna be a small person in a big field, mostly male dominated and dominated by institutions and really competing against the really big people. So that was a challenge. I think niching myself was probably the easiest component of it. I was able to easily find a niche because I wanted to practice gynecology. I wanted to focus on total wellness and I wanted to focus on women's health with my background in health education and promotion. I think being able to find the niche helped to separate me from the rest of the big people that I was competing against. But I think that the biggest part of it was just understanding the environment and the culture of medicine in my area and understanding the business, because even with the MBA background, I still had no idea of of what I was up against.
I love that, and this is a consistent theme that I see with many guests. As the saying goes, the riches are in the niches. It's much easier to be a big fish in a small pond than trying to jump right into the ocean. Get one vertical, dial it in, and go from there. A common theme that we see is, a lot of people when they're building their practice, they think, I just need more and more services. That's how I grow. That's how I scale. That's how I help more people.
Mm.
And maybe you disagree, but in my experience with people, that doesn't seem to be the case. Or would you agree with that?
Right, because everything looks shiny, especially when you're first starting out and you're trying to build your revenue and you're trying to build your brand. Everybody brings all of these different things to you. And I do know that that was one of my bigger mistakes. I had to learn how to focus in and actually niche down. So I knew initially that I wanted to do gynecology and weight management. That was going to be my focus. And it's the big epidemic going on of obesity, especially in the southeastern area of the United States. So I knew that that was a great way to start. But of course, during that time, so many people came and brought so many other things. So I did fall off of my focus for a little bit, but that's what I learned over those first few years was it was important to, first of all, focus on what I'm doing and get every small stream going well and allow that to be successful before adding in a lot of other things that just look shiny, but they weren't necessarily what I needed at the time. So that did take some, time for me to realize to focus in on the gynecology and the weight management. And once I had those up and running, I stopped adding things after the first 3 or 4 years.
It's like that Bruce Lee quote, saying improvement is done through cutting off, not adding. And that's something we see again and again. And I'm definitely I was a culprit for that myself, just thinking I need to add more and more. As a new entrepreneur, obviously when starting off, can you run through what benefits niching down actually had for you? Why was it so powerful?
I think it helped decrease my competition because once I was able to separate why I was different from the big competition, it allowed me to pull in my real avatar and my real market. So with me niching down, I was able to focus on women as well as adolescent. And then when I focused on the gynecology as well as the weight management, it was easy for me to bring other services in. Initially, I brought other services in for cash flow, but those weren't necessarily the services that worked well with my brand. So it had me kind of going off brand for a little bit. And so we had to figure some things out over those first few years to realize that exactly what my patients wanted and giving them what they wanted and what they needed and what was really in demand.
And if you were to go through it again, would you? Because again, as a digital marketer, we on our end is something we always do. We take on the less than ideal clients in our case, and you're kind of running perpendicular instead of consistently running the right direction. Do you think that was a necessary evil at the time, or if you were to start again, would you still offer those cash flow positive services even if they weren't aligned with your niche?
Well, when I
It's
look
tough, isn't
back,
it?
I know when I look back, if I had to do it to do over some of the things I would do the same because I learned from those mistakes, so many things that I would not have learned had I not made those mistakes. So, for example, when I first started, I did an aesthetic service called Smart Lipo. If I had it to do all over again, and when I think back of everything that I went through, bringing that into my practice and how it wasn't probably the best fit, I don't know that I would necessarily change it because I learned so much from making that big mistake.
Mm.
But if I was going to redo this and start another practice or purchase another practice to make it look like me, Bella, I would never have smart lipo in there. But for what I learned from that experience, which was terrible at the time, but it's made me a much better business now, I still wouldn't change it.
It's a great answer. There's lessons in all of these, even if they're not 100% aligned uh, with where we're at today. It just doesn't look like it at the time.
Exactly. Did not look at it as like that at the time.
Probably go, why am I doing this to myself?
Exactly, exactly. But it kept the business afloat. I mean, it was really what we needed at the time. I'm just glad that I realized it before it was detrimental to get out
Mm.
of it and move forward and then focus back in and niche back in on what my patients actually needed. And that was the majority of my patients and the real avatar that I really wanted to appeal to. Because at first, I think I was trying to appeal to everybody because I needed patients. I needed cash flow. I needed appointments on the schedule. So I wasn't really focused in on a certain kind of client. That was over time that I realized that it was this client that I needed to make my business successful and for me to be able to serve people in the best way.
I always find it so fascinating. I just had a conversation with another guest, Alan McGee, and his background was actually in hospitality before he got into med spas. And it was an interesting concept because we were saying at the end of the day, if it's a service-based business, there's generally some quite consistent themes. And I'm sure we can talk about your learnings with the MBA, but every mistake that you're saying you learned, I've done the exact same thing, even though it's a digital marketing agency. You need the cash and
Exactly.
you know it's not great for you. But again, 2020 hindsight, and if you need the cash, you need the cash. So it's just really interesting seeing these universal principles and how you've managed to seamlessly tie them together.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So with regards to your MBA, and we'll dive into what you're doing today, just out of interest, obviously you had the background in the MBA. When you were starting the practice, was there anything else that sort of caught you off guard, that you found more challenging than you expected, be it cash flow management, the logistics of having a practice, hiring, what were the biggest challenges that you didn't see coming? And what advice, what lessons did you learn as a result?
So I think the brand component of it was what I didn't necessarily bring from my MBA. I think the main thing I got from my MBA is to learn what I needed help with. Like understanding that I need an accountant, learning how to read my profit and loss statement, learning how to look at the money a little bit better, just having that background understanding that I would not have had I not done the MBA. And I think the biggest thing I learned too from the MBA was the leadership component. So being able to lead a team, even though I can always improve upon that, but just the organizational leadership is what I got most out of the MBA. But as far as what I learned as far as running a practice, I've learned more doing masterminds and working with other business owners and doing those sorts of things as far as running a successful practice. I think the MBA was good for background information on business in general since I had none. I think it was good for the organizational leadership and learning how to lead a team and understanding the importance of like customer service and starting a brand. But I don't think that the MBA made me successful in being an entrepreneur, if you can understand what I'm saying. Does that make
Um,
sense?
100%. Yeah, it's that sort of the foundational work of the MBA, but at the end of the day, you need to learn from people that are doing what you're doing because that's where the nuance is, and that's where you can set yourself apart. To
And
piggyback,
and the time, I'm sorry, and the time. So like in 2010, when I finished my MBA, digital marketing was not nearly as big as it was in 2012. You know what I mean? So they
Mhm.
weren't teaching us that when I was working on my MBA. They weren't focused on social media ads and Google ads and search engine optimization. It was more of the basics of an MBA, bringing that healthcare component into it, which I think was beneficial. But again, it wasn't enough to help me really understand how to market or practice during the times of 2012 until now, because everything that I learned from marketing in my MBA is almost obsolete when you're talking about technology.
it's a great point. That's actually a perfect segue into the next thing I was going to talk about. You talked about the importance of brand. What does me Bella Wellness stand for? Number one, I suppose that's the first question I'd ask, and I'd love to talk about how you develop that. But how would you define the Me Bella Wellness brand
The
to
Me
any of
Bell
our
was
listeners?
great.
Yeah.
So I think it's a one-stop shop for women in their middle ages, even though we take care of adolescents and we also take care of men. But the focus of it was compassionate customer service and giving people an experience in their medical care that they've never had before. So being able to come and see a doctor who's relatable, having an all-female team to serve, teaching my team real customer service and how to make patients feel good, how to make people relax when they're going to a gynecology practice. So I built the brand on how I wanted to practice medicine, focusing on traditional as well as holistic treatment options, but also total wellness. So not just focusing on the problem, but focusing on prevention of disease, focusing on the total wellness of the woman. So not just making sure she gets her pap smears, but making sure when she goes through every stage of her life, she has some wellness options to improve her quality of life. So focusing in on menopause was really huge for me, and perimenopause, because for women that affects us in our 30s through the rest of our lives. So me niching into menopause and total wellness and prevention and screening and giving people the option to have traditional treatment options, but also bringing in that holistic component. I think is what separates me, Bella, from the rest of the practices. And when people come there, it's like a family. They feel a part of the team. They get treated a certain way. My staff knows that from the very moment that the patient calls until they go home and receive their follow-up, that there's a certain experience that they have to have. So I think bringing that customer experience to medicine helped to really develop and define my brand.
Well, I think with over 1,000 5-star reviews, it's clearly working. You're doing something right. So the proof's in the pudding there. So you can definitely be proud of yourself on that front. With regards to the actual developing of this brand, as you say it, um, this is actually very much mirrors, as I said, an episode that I just did. In 2024 and beyond, in an age where people are talking about AI and automation, all these things, the way we stand now is the fact that it's a human to human interaction, and especially in the industry that you're in, it's more important than ever. And a thing we often see is the best clinics, like me, Bella Wellness, are the ones that really put the patient first. As a previous guest of mine, Ken Mitchell, said, if you take care of the patients, the revenue will look after itself. How do you go about building this brand? Online, offline, digital marketing. Was that strategic, or what strategies have you implemented to build the brand to what it is today?
So initially, I was kind of all over the place and I didn't really have a strategy. I was kind of figuring it out as I went. And again, what I learned from my MBA and I initially started doing had become obsolete. And so I started working with a few digital marketers at the very beginning. I did understand from the beginning the importance of social media. So I was always active on Facebook Lives and talking about what I was doing, and one of the ways I built the brand in my community before I had more of an online presence was networking and just going to every event, speaking at every event, talking about the way I practice medicine, what's different about the way I practice medicine, really focusing in on educating the community and then trying to build a community. But I wasn't really doing it as much online as I am now. So over time, with more training, going to conferences, being a part of masterminds. And that's what really helped to turn things around for me, I think, was the first mastermind that I actually did. And I did that during the time when there was so much transition in medicine. I think I did my first one in 2016. So I had already been in practice for like 6 years, kind of figuring it out on my own and using the information that I had from my MBA, which again wasn't much for the marketing component. Um, so I started out community. And then as I got that online presence, it was because I did a mastermind and I started working on branding myself and then working on allowing more people outside of just the community that I serve, understanding what I do to educate people in general. So it just gave me a much better presence, and it helped to really brand me as an expert in the field, which not only brought more patients into the practice, but again gave me a more online and a wider geographical presence.
That's great. No, I love that. On that note, masterminds, you said it took you a bit of time to get into it. Is that something that you would change if you were to go through it all again? Would you be joining masterminds from day one? And if so,
Yeah.
how can a clinic owner find a good mastermind that can help them?
Um, I think research, being online and, social media, following the right groups, so that you can try to find a community that fit with your goals and your aspirations and that fit with your brand. So I really didn't know a whole lot about it. It was when Facebook ads first, I first learned about Facebook ads and I was just really having a hard time in my practice trying to figure out, in medicine, of course, dealing with insurance, you cannot really run a profitable practice in 2024, at least where I live. There has to be some kind of cash component to the practice. So I started my practice off initially with insurance as well as cash when I did the weight management component. Where was I going with this?
Um, the the my own brain's melting now after this
And we
part.
talked about building the brand and how I built the brand and the strategy for the brand, right? So, yeah, so when I got to the mastermind, here we go,
Masterminds,
I'm
yeah,
back.
yeah.
Yeah, so when I started my first mastermind, that's when I really learned about online presence, digital marketing, really branding myself. That's when I wrote my first book, to give more information to my patients and started understanding that, I could afford to market online, but I couldn't afford to market traditionally. So that online presence, building community was a lot of what I learned from doing that particular mastermind. And then that introduced me to other masterminds. So initially it was a medical mogul focused mastermind. So it was specifically for physicians. And then from that mastermind, I would go to other conferences about marketing and businesses, and I started meeting other people and I found other masterminds. So now when I do a mastermind, it's not as focused and niched as just medical. Because to me, business is business, and I learned so much more from a diverse mastermind with all different kinds of businesses. Because to me, marketing is marketing, and business is business. No matter whether it's service, no matter whether it's products, it's still some of the same basics. So I think that the masterminds really kept me up to date too with the ever changing technology. So I wouldn't have known about AI until now had I not been in a mastermind. I wouldn't have known about building a team and the importance of team and the importance of having a C-suite and the importance of, training a leadership team. So it was just so many things I learned from being in the masterminds, but in diverse masterminds with like-minded business people who also had successful business that weren't necessarily similar to mine, but they had similar success and similar goals.
I think that makes so much sense, especially, I'm not sure if have you read the book, The E-Myth Revisited? The E-Myth?
Yeah. Yes.
Exactly. That's what jumps to mind when I hear you speaking. For anyone listening who hasn't read it, fundamentally, one of the main things is usually when somebody starts business, in this case, a medical professional, they start off as a quote unquote technician. They know the industry, but once they start the business, they realize there's a lot more to running a business than actually implementing. Then you have to learn about management
Right.
and the entrepreneurial thing. So I think once you know your industry as a quote unquote technician, at that point it's so essential to learn the universal business principles that number one, allow you to
Mm.
pivot, but number two, give you that competitive advantage that maybe other people that are still in the technician phase, so to speak, haven't picked up yet. And you can learn across industries. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I have learned so much from because healthcare and business, they don't really like they're kind of antagonistic. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're taught as a physician to serve and to be a clinician. So you almost have to overcome this guilt of
Mm,
being a business and being in medicine because you're taught that that is selfish as a physician to focus on the money. But
mm.
any business has to focus on cash flow because you have to, generate revenue to pay your people. So yeah, so it was a whole different concept. So I think that me being able to be around other businesses outside of healthcare was a huge advantage for me because I could see things from a different perspective that I wouldn't have had I not been around these other businesses outside of the healthcare field.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's nearly your duty to make sure the clinic is a success. It's why we call it, or as a Clinic Success Secrets podcast, because you can have that bigger impact and you need to be profitable, so you're sustainable. And I think it's just so important. Bringing it back to where you're at today, Mia, the services that you're offering in your clinic, what does that balance look like between the different services these days?
So I would say it's probably 50% gynecology, but the cash flow is probably half and half.
Mm,
So I focus on gynecology. We've learned to focus on that as our bread and butter when we're marketing. That is the focus, women's health care. But because of the needs of my patients, we, added a few other services that my patients need that happen to include, other populations like men now. So we started out with the gynecology and the weight management. With the weight management, I learned more about total wellness and the supplement components, which were very important. So I brought that into it because I wanted my patients to have the good supplements, the, high quality supplements, and I knew that they were getting what they needed. So that's how the supplements came in. And then when I started dealing with the perimenopausal women, I learned about hormones and the need for hormones, but I niched myself with pellets once I realized that that was going to be the best option for my patients. So then I brought the pellet component on. When I brought the pellet component on, I was trained to serve women and men. So my ladies would come in, get their pellets and feel better. So that's how the male component came in, because then they went home to their husbands, and their husbands needed the same thing. I was trained in it, so I started taking care of men. Then I realized that as we age and mature, even with hormone balance, that sexual function component still changes, and that's a different service. So that's how I added the intimacy services on. So I kind of niche myself out according to what my patients actually need. And it's just all worked out. But again, that was over time that I learned how to focus. I learned how to focus on my brand. I figured out what my um communication style and what I was gonna communicate to others. So that's what kept me from grabbing at all the shiny things like, Botox. I don't do Botox. I'm a gynecologist. I focus on women's health. I focus on sexual function. I focus on hormone balance. Botox of the face does not fit with that. So I think it was just over time with experience, figuring out what my patients really need and how to improve the quality of the population that I am. And I think having that passion for what I do made just a huge difference in my success as well. Because I'm not doing anything. I mean, everything that I do is to really help my patient, and I'm passionate about it. So it's been so much easier for me to learn and change the practice accordingly to benefit my patients.
Yeah, it reminds me of a saying, you should focus on the who, not the how. In the sense like really
Yeah.
start with that after really focus on like my personas that I'm targeting, what they actually need. And it helps you cut out the shiny object syndrome a lot, like you said, because it can be so tempting, like we said, and better off keeping it lean, niche down, and building from there. Um, in terms of so those services, you got the gynecology, you got the intimacy and all that. From a marketing standpoint, um, how do they compare, with each other? What has worked from the gynecology standpoint versus the intimacy? Obviously, intimacy, you can have those restrictions, paid search won't work as well. What does that look like for you?
So say one more time what you want me to focus on.
The what marketing strategies have worked for gynecology versus the intimate health, and how
Marketing
do they
strategy.
compare? Irish
Okay,
accent, sorry.
marketing. Our little accents kind of flat. So marketing strategy for gynecology. So that was one of my biggest learning things is we initially focused on gynecology and weight management, but a lot of my marketing was focused on the cash service because I was focusing on marketing what brought in the easiest cash flow. Right. But over time, what we learned was gynecology includes way more people. So it's much easier for us to focus on gynecology because it's a service that everybody needs. So once we get people in for gynecology, it's easy to internally market to to them for our other services. So online is much easier and it's much cheaper for me to focus on gynecology. And then it's much easier for me to bring those people once they trust me with gynecology and upsell them to the other services that are more expensive. So we did have to change the focus of our marketing because we veered off to focusing on the hormone balance, the intimacy services, the weight management, those things that were cash. And of course, with medicine, one of the biggest problems is the amount of time it takes to collect cash when you're dealing with insurance. So for the business, you know, um, be able to function appropriately cash flow wise, it's always necessary to have the insurance because that's our basic. That's most of it, but we need those cash flows coming in to keep everything sustainable. So I think the biggest difference that we really do have to focus on the gynecology, and then we have to have our customer service and our internal marketing up to such a standard that it's easy for us to transition our gynecology patients to our other services, but understanding that we still have a certain avatar that we want to focus on when we're talking about gynecology and being able to upsell them to more expensive services that require them to have disposable income. It's not going to be your typical gynecology patient because we take all kinds of insurance. So that gives us all kinds of patients. So we take Medicaid. So we have patients who wouldn't be able to necessarily afford some of the cash services. So I think niching down and focusing on our real avatar from the gynecology, even though we're going to bring a little bit of everybody in, but making sure we're also bringing a huge number in that can also benefit from our other services and be able to afford our other services.
That makes it's a great answer, first of all. But again, it's funny circling back to those universal business principles. On my end personally, with clinic success partners, very often we find, there might be that sort of that leading domino, that initial service that can get the ball rolling, get you, from our client standpoint, get them cash flow positive. It could be Facebook ads, Instagram ads, whatever, and then we build the foundational work. Similarly, then, for example, you said you don't do facial Botox. In the case of a med spa, very often what they find is, Botox might be their gynecology, so to speak. It might be their low
Right.
hanging fruit, get them in the door, and then you do the upsell. Um, and
Exactly.
and the money, it sounds bad, but we have to do this as a business. The money is in the
Right.
upsell and the cross sell. Um, what does that process look like for you? Do you standardize these cross sells and upsells? You focus on email marketing, flyers. How does that look?
So internal marketing for us includes our television. So we have TVs at each patient room, and it shows all of the different services that we have. We do a lot of social media marketing. I launch every month, like with a webinar. And so now my webinar is focused a little bit more on women's health and gynecology because more people are going to attend that because that's going to, affect more people. And then with each webinar, I still bring in those other cash services, so I use webinars. I definitely use Facebook ads. And the other thing that we changed a lot, I told you about earlier, was with the Facebook ads. We were focusing on Facebook ads, which work really well when we're trying to do a webinar and get cold leads and gather new people, new leads. However, when we're talking about a gynecology practice and gynecology as a service, if you think about it, when people look for a gynecologist, they don't go to Facebook, they go to Google ads. So now we focus a lot more on Google ads for people looking for gynecology. So I think we end up getting a lot of our gynecology patients from our Google ads, word of mouth referral, but we get a lot of our other patients for the other services with our webinars, with our Facebook ads, with our social media presence, with me doing podcasts, creating my own podcast, and really building a community. So I think
Mm.
that at the end of the day, for the gynecology as well as the cash services, the community building, the education, the free information, that's what's been the most successful part of our marketing yet, is being consistent with giving information to the community and then being able to use all those different avenues of pulling in new leads as well as nurturing our old leads so that they can not only do gynecology but upsell to other services and vice versa. We get some people to come in because they know that I am the hormone expert in the area and they're still doing their gynecology with other people. So, making sure that we also bring them in for the gynecology because, it's really difficult to change your gynecologist because it's a very intimate relationship that women have with the gynecologist. So, still being able to sell them over to our gynecology services so that they're using all the services we have for their total wellness needs.
Again, a great answer. You can really see that impact, that influence that the other businesses have had on you. You're one of the first guests that I've chatted to that is really leveraging things like webinars and stuff. So, I mean, hats off to you on that front. And I love that strategy. It's so simple when you say it out loud. Have a TV in the waiting room. Like that's so stupidly simple. It
Mhm,
makes so much
mhm,
sense. Um,
mhm.
it's that's
And
that's
even
genius. I love
even
that.
what's
Yeah.
funny is for our hormone pellet therapy, the one thing that has probably gotten us the most questions is this one, um, stand that we have in there, and it just lists out all the symptoms. Are you having fatigue, joint pain, hot flashes, night sweats, problems with sleep, decreased sex drive? So my patients immediately when they come into the room, they're like, "I have every single symptom." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's then I think the internal marketing, plays a larger role than most people realize, and having the TV not just in the waiting room, because of course the goal is for them not to have to wait, but in the patient room. So
Mhm.
having those constantly running with our services. So while they're waiting on the provider to come in, That's the only thing they have to look at. And then follow up. We do a lot of email, nurturing email. Whenever we have a webinar, they get on our email list and we're constantly just giving information and free information. And then I still do like a couple of little episodes on Facebook, Weekly Wellness with Dr. Me. It's not weekly anymore, but I started that during COVID when we had to do a lot of pivoting with marketing and everything. And we do like an ageless intimacy. Me and my husband do that. I brought my husband in as my CEO, but he's also my male intimacy specialist because once I was bringing men to a gynecology practice, I had to have a face for men as well. So he's worked
Mm.
out really well for being able to talk to men, be relatable to the men, and bring more men into the practice. So I think it's the combination of, but I think that Facebook presence, that social media presence, that internet presence, and still being able to go speak at different conferences and put my name out, even in a wider geographic range, has still helped my business locally at
Mhm.
Me Bella in Birmingham.
Again, there's so much to unpack there. And if anybody is, for anyone who is listening to this, rewind the past 6, 7 minutes because there's money to be made for everyone there. And I think it's the simple things. You've got the people in the door, you might as well educate them. And it's a one and done time investment. Get those little ads running and people will be actively asking you about it. It'll make your job so much easier. Uh, with that being said, then, you know, we have our niche. We know, right, okay, we need to focus on that beaming experience for everyone. We know that um, search obviously for things like gynecology is so important. Google Ads makes sense. From a logistical standpoint in the advertising, are you running retargeting ads on Facebook and Instagram after people have arrived on the website from Google Ads at the minute? So
Am I
retarget them on Facebook.
running?
So Google Ads, they arrive on
Yeah,
the
I don't
website.
know if we do that. I don't know if we do that exactly.
Mm,
We retarget from, like, if I do a webinar, we definitely retarget people who've done previous webinars, and we continue to retarget them after the webinar because there's usually some sort of an offer. And that offer is, it can be a gynecology appointment, but a lot of times the offer is one of our cash services. But I don't know if we have linked the two, the Facebook along with the Google. That's something I need to ask my marketing team
yeah.
and have them look into and talk to you more about as well.
Yeah, happy to help. It can be powerful. It can be sort of a force multiplier and plug the holes. And then with the webinar, obviously, again, I love that you're doing this. And it's just, you can repurpose it, you got your content sorted, it ticks so many boxes and helps email marketing. What do you, with regards, are you running Facebook ads that right now or just your existing list or how does promoting the webinar itself look at the minute?
Yeah, so we do the Facebook ad. We don't do Google ads for our webinars, but we do the Facebook ad. We do email nurturing campaigns before, to get them to attend. Also afterwards for the offer, and then we put them in our email list so they still go into our nurturing campaign. And since we do a webinar every month, it's pretty consistent that they're always getting emails from us. But what I do know that we need to do that would be very beneficial is more targeted nurturing marketing in general outside of the webinar and finding out like exactly what people are interested in and continuing to give them information and the opportunity to, take advantage of the services, but still targeting them with more information. That's the thing that I think has worked most, targeting with information and not just emails to purchase or to attend.
Mm, yeah, again, that whole sort of middle funnel focus, just providing value, 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 and then leaving everybody else for dust once they realize how much you know. And again, combine that with the things like the 5-star reviews on Google, which you're you're not short on, and everything else. It's a recipe for success. Again, I want to run to the actual operations of the practice. Uh, we've talked about this. As far as I'm concerned, everything in life boils down to the quality of relationships with yourself, relationships with others. It's what everything boils down to internally, right? You have a team. I know employee wellness and team building are crucial practices of, your business. Do you have any sort of tips and tricks for, prioritizing creating that supportive environment for your team? And are there any strategies that have worked for you to make sure everyone's glued together?
Yes, great thing. So I guess developing how we want the team structured. So we have an executive team, which is me, the founder and director, and then I have my business manager, who really is similar to a chief operating officer, and then I have my husband, who's the CEO. So we're the executive team, and then we have a leadership team. Our leadership team is composed of people who lead different departments. So of course, we have a front desk and a back desk and all those sorts of things. So we have a leadership team, and then we have the team as a whole. So making sure that, one, we're having meetings and productive meetings, which everybody hates meetings. So we try not to have meetings, but meetings are necessary for the team to run efficiently and to build team leadership and and to build team in general. So I think having more meetings. So we started having more huddles. So the leadership team has like a couple of huddles a week. Now we're adding where each department does a daily short huddle. We make sure that the executive team has a scheduled standing meeting once a week. We make sure that we have a team meeting, two team meetings a month, as well as the leadership. So I think building the time into running the business is the biggest thing, because you're so busy generating revenue, trying to see patients, trying to get patients in the door. And so the last thing, once you start getting all the patients in, you have to develop systems and processes, you know what I mean? So you've been kind of somewhat developing them along, but they're ever changing because you're growing. And so you're evolving. And what worked before, when we were seeing, patients before COVID, does not work now. So I think having the time for meetings, having the time for training and meetings, and then making sure that we're doing the huddles, making sure that we're doing the meetings, and making sure that we're running productive meetings has made a huge difference in us being able to develop our systems and our process and define our operations better, because it's an ever learning and ever changing thing. So it does become very frustrating for the team.
I can imagine. And then bringing up to now, in addition to those inevitable challenges you have with the service-based business, um, are there any existing challenges, today that you find on an ongoing basis? We still need to work on this. And again, this is going to be with any business. What are the, you know, to what are the regular challenges that you feel um you meet with where you're at with the clinic right now? Is it I need to put more of a focus on keeping people happy internally, the patients? Like, what does that look like today?
I think once we realized, after a lot of training, and going to, like, we went to Tuck for an executive leadership training, which was amazing. So we learned a lot from that. But trainer, yeah. Um, but building team. So focusing on team, to me, the biggest challenge is team. So keeping team happy, hiring the right team, training the team appropriately, um, developing the team, but still at the same time, while you're doing all of that, figuring out the systems and the operations while you're trying to train a team to be a team. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
it's, yeah, I
mm,
think the team is the hardest thing. So understanding that we're gonna always be hiring certain people.
mm,
Medical assistants are gonna come and go. So we had to figure out that we can't get frustrated because we um can't keep the people. We just got to develop a better training and onboarding system, so that when we're hiring all the time, it's efficient. We can easily get people trained and we can easily get people onboarded. But the other thing that we had to learn the hard way is that it does require a lot of training. Like, you can't just bring, because during COVID, everybody was desperate for employees. So you would bring somebody in and you needed that body. You just wanted to get them started, but you weren't taking the right time to really train them and train them on the brand of the company, train them on all of the real basics of being in the practice outside of the clinical component of the practice. So I think our biggest challenge is developing team, and hiring and keeping our employees, but we have learned over time that it requires a system and that our most important customer is our team. It's not the patient, it's not the people who pay us, it's the people that we pay, because without them, we can't bring in the right people to generate the cash flow. So our change in focus to our team and giving our team and our team members what they need has truly changed the practice overall, including getting us more patients into the door because we moved the focus from just getting patients to the team and making sure our team was happy so they could take great care of our patients.
I think that's so, so important. I mean, it's something that I see with my own team, the principles that we need to apply for clients or patients, we usually, we have to look at ourselves and say, same principles apply. Like we said, everything boils down to relationships.
Mhm.
Team members need to be treated at least as well as the people that they're helping if we want to help them.
Yeah.
It's like giving from an empty cup, you know?
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
team, yeah, that's the most challenging thing,
yeah.
keeping
And
team.
the flip side of that, right? So you talk about the challenges. I mean, I'm sure you've got a few, but what are your proudest moments with up in your career running Me Bella Wellness up to this point? I'm sure there's a few, but
Proud moment.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Um, in general, when I, like, sit down and take the time to, like, think about it, you know what I mean? I think that knowing that I started a practice with 0 patient, and then was able to expand my company to take care of the number of patients that I do now, and, I started my company with 3 employees, me, my business manager, and 1 medical assistant, and now we're up to about 15 employees. We moved from a small office space where it was 1,200 square feet, maybe a little bit less than 1,200 square feet with 2 rooms to, going to more of I think it was like a 2,600 square foot space. And then now we own our building and we're in, uh, I don't know, 4,000 square foot uh, square foot. So being able to see how much I've evolved and how much I've grown, how much the practice has grown, how much my team has evolved. I think some of my proudest things are my team and the amount of my core team still being present and like understanding my vision, believing in my vision and working for my vision as if it was their own. So I think that my team development is probably one of my proudest things. I think being able to work with my husband and for me to bring him on board and him to elevate the practice the way he has, because since he's been there, that's when we bought a building, built out a building, expanded significantly, and increased our services. So I guess it would just have to be, from where I started to where I am now. I'm really proud of it and that we are still just standing and we made it through COVID. On top of
Mhm.
all of that, we had that COVID thing to come through, which really made us have to do a lot of pivoting.
Yeah, that little thing that affected a few businesses. I mean, honestly, it's a testament when you look. It's a moments like that where you really learn, right? What am I made of, and go back to your foundations, and then you've a stronger, as I said, foundation, and you're more resilient and you know uh, powerful moving forward. Last question before I ask where people can find you and all that. Again, I want to be respectful for your time. What future, what trends do you see in the women's health, coming up and being prevalent moving forward? You know, what way do you see the women's health niche or industry, whatever you want to call it, heading or in the next few years? And then how do you think clinics can prepare for those upcoming trends?
That's a very interesting question. I think healthcare is going to make some huge changes over the next few years, just with uh, access to providers in the United States. We have a huge number of physicians who are actually retiring. The baby boomers are going out. So access to care is going to change significantly. And I think expectations of patients will change significantly as it already has since COVID, the expectations of the patient. But I also think that women are becoming more empowered and they're more empowered for their health, but also in the sexual function component of medicine that was not really talked about at all even 5 years ago. It was barely talked about for women. So I think that the total wellness component, um, people being more empowered to focus on their health and take control of their health. The way that people search for their doctors now, it's not based on who's on your insurance, but people actually research their doctors and they have specific criteria that they want. And I think that people are actually going to invest more in their health because they're going to understand the need and the importance for prevention and total wellness so that they can live a life of wellness. So I just think in women's health, it's going to change tremendously. And unfortunately, it's gonna be more corporate owned, so I am one of the few private practice still left out here that's not owned by a hospital. So the option to have the services that I offer are gonna be a little bit more limited, I think, in the future, especially when you're talking about small business owners compared to hospitals and big corporations owning practice, which definitely changes the way a practice run. So yeah, I think it's a lot of changes going on in healthcare that will affect us, but I think it's so many great things that we're gonna be able to get out of it. It's gonna be more positives than negatives, but it's definitely gonna change the way we market, the way we reach women, and the way we even practice medicine because of the time and acceptability.
I mean, it's a great way to finish it off. So listen, with that being said, yeah, there's so much to unpack. I'm definitely gonna have to listen to this myself at least 2 or 3 times because you drop so many great bits of advice from, you know, how to improve your internal marketing by having simple solutions like the TV. I think that's just such a simple one. The importance of managing your
You on the
team
internet?
to everything else. Yeah, I just think thanks so much for it. That being we're back. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, good thing we're ending, right?
Thank God. Yeah, I mean, I was just hyping you up. Uh,
At first, I
uh,
thought it was me. I was like, yeah, because sometimes it's me too.
no, it happened to me in my last podcast. It's again, so I had to push it back. I'll ask one quick question. We'll leave it at that. I can run through some quick stuff on your end if you're okay for time, but to wrap up the podcast, one quick question. Um, Yeah, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. We covered so much. Again, I'm gonna have to listen to this a good few times. You unpack so much. Where can people contact you if they want to or find out more about what you do?
So they can go to my website, mibellawellness.com, MIBELLA wellness.com. They can also follow me on social media as Mia Cowan MD or Dr. Mia Cowan MD, as well as Me Bella Health and Wellness on Facebook.
Yeah, that perfect. So anyone check her out. Again, thanks so much. Really appreciate it, and I look forward to having another one of these conversations again. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.